Good evening, Facebook friends and family. Good evening to our Facebook, Instagram, Periscope, YouTube, and all of our social media families. Welcome to our special edition, our town hall meeting with Congressman Danny K. Davis of the Illinois 7th Congressional District, in conjunction with the Chicago Medical Society and the Metro Infectious Disease Consultants. On tonight, the question is, why is the corona vaccine so important? Why don't you guys come on in, continue to share, start your watch party, sign in, let us know that you are here and that you are available for your questions and answers. This will be a spectacular show so you guys can get in-depth information in reference to those heart-wrenching questions about the corona vaccine. So come on in, share your videos, and begin to start those watch parties so we will know that you are here. We have your questions, and I see people chiming in already. Thank you so very much for being here. Thank you to Marvelous Harris. I see Marvelous has signed in, and she is here. To Carrie Steele and Mariana Sparopoulos. I see that you guys have signed in just as well to Audrey Jacobs. Thank you guys so much for signing in and being here. Thanks to all of our Instagram family who has begun to sign in. So, Congressman, at this time, our agenda says that our openings and our remarks and everything. Hey, Martha, we see you chiming on in. Good evening. Thank you. Right here on Facebook, Martha has arrived. Start those watch parties. Congressman, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Well, let me just say this. Um, I am so delighted that all of us have the opportunity to engage in conversation about one of the most important topics, I think, that our society has experienced in a long time. We are locked into a pandemic, a medical crisis that many people are trying to figure out how to respond to. And all that we really know is we know what our scientists have told us, what they have learned, what they have arrived at in terms of what is direction. We also know that we have been blessed. And of course, there may be people who don't use that kind of terminology, blessed. I happen to be a practicing Christian in terms of some beliefs that I have. And so I use it. There are some people who use other ways of describing faith that they have in things. But I suggest that we've been tremendously blessed and have vaccines. Scientists have come up with products that they think is going to help us ward off the virus, that's going to help protect us from it. And some people, African Americans in particular, as well as others, are reluctant to make use of the vaccine based upon the experimentation that has occurred, based upon what they have heard, based upon fears that they have. And I understand that. I really do. But on the other hand, I understand that yesterday was yesterday and today is today, which means that progress has been made since Tuskegee. As some of my colleagues have said, this is not Tuskegee. This is 2020 going into 2021. And we've learned some things since then. So to have a distinguished group of scientists, of physicians, to talk about the vaccine, why it's important that we make use of it, why it's important that we have trust in science and in scientists. So I'm just thankful and grateful that all of us are here. It is the idea, quite frankly, of Dr. Reddy, who suggested that we might want to do this. And I'm one who always look forward to taking suggestions, taking thoughts and ideas that others may have, and figure out a way to make use of them. So that's exactly what I think we'll be doing tonight. You know, when I was going to school, I had a woman who taught, and she had so many little pithy things that she used as a way of convincing you to do things. And she used to tell us that a wise old owl sat on an oak. The more he heard, the less he spoke. The less he spoke, the more he heard. Then she'd look at us and say, "Now I want you boys to be like that wise old bird." And of course, if we didn't comply, she had some other ways of assisting us. So I'm going to comply and ask Dr. Reddy if he would just take over this panel. And I'm going to do like that wise old bird. I'm going to sit and I'm going to listen and be educated and enlightened. And Dr. Reddy, thank you so much for the idea.
Thank you, Congressman. You know, one thing that I got to say, Congressman, your steadfast leadership and your commitment to the public service during these difficult times, it's highly commendable. You know, in spite of serious threat to your own health, you always stayed with the community and worked tirelessly to improve the health of the most vulnerable people of the inner city of Chicago during these challenging times. You know, also, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for being a great advocate with your continued support to the Chicago Medical Society for many years. You know, there is no doubt, we all agree we are in the midst of this unprecedented crisis of lifetime. COVID-19 has impacted all aspects of our livelihood and, in fact, created havoc in our daily activities of normal living. You know, we all agree this has been a devastating year so far. You know, we've seen more than 330,000 people have died from this pandemic, with more than 19 million cases, and of course, trillions of dollars of economic damage. You know, millions of people are out of work and struggling to pay their bills. On top of it, millions of children are missing out school to having a good education and you know, enjoying their good times in their school. But one thing that I could for sure say, you know, Americans are strong, committed people with great resilience. You know, we have seen humans have never made more progress on any disease in a year than we did with the COVID-19 this year. You know, under these under normal circumstances, usually it takes years to produce a conventional the vaccine. But this time, you know, we have multiple vaccines were created in less than 1 year. You know, I myself consider this as a scientific, you know, modern medical miracle. But unfortunately, you know, we are not out of danger yet. You know, some of these, as we all know, you know, the experts will agree, some of these computer models are suggesting, you know, we could get, it could even get worse over the next month or so. You know, we need to learn more about new variant of this virus that has appeared. And then most of the experts are saying that even though it spreads faster, but not to be as lethal as what we had seen with the COVID-19. You know, we have so many reasons to be hopeful. You know, using the masks, social distancing, and following these mitigation measures, definitely it has proven it will slow the spread of the virus and definitely would save the lives while the vaccines are being rolled out. We all know there are two vaccines that are recently been approved in the US, Moderna and Pfizer. And I think at least more than 3 million people have gotten the vaccine so far. So there are several other vaccines are now undergoing these efficacy studies. Like Moderna and Pfizer, most of these vaccines, mostly, a lot of these that are in the experimental or being trialed right now, they all have the same uh, same aspect of these vaccines, attacking the same part of this coronavirus, what we call the spike protein that is existent on top of this coronavirus, which the experts will talk about it. What I could say is Moderna and Pfizer, when they developed, they use this technology called messenger RNA technology. It is no surprise that they were able to get this vaccine, mRNA vaccine, out in a short period of time. By design, this type of vaccine can be created faster than the conventional ones. It works by using this messenger RNA to instruct our body to produce a distinctive protein called a spike protein. And then our immune system will kick in and attacks anything with that spike on it, including the COVID-19 virus that we are seeing right now. We were able to, with this technology, we were able to produce these vaccines so fast, and they were able to produce in large quantities because RNA sequence that codes for the spike protein, then it is to grow on the protein itself. And there is an advantage with this too. And unlike all the conventional vaccines, this mRNA vaccine, it does not contain any virus at all. In other words, none of us will get COVID-19 from this vaccine. That's for guarantee. I know we all know, and a lot of the people are hesitant, but I like to reassure the approval process that happened. It has been, what I could think of, it has been independent and very transparent. Most of the people who were involved in this approval process have no allegiance with any part of the federal government, or for that matter, any pharmaceutical companies. It just purely, we got to believe in science. We know that, we first identified this brand new virus in January, and we are able to produce this vaccine, and we are able to give to the people in December. It's not by no means compromising the safety, nor is it compromising the scientific integrity. It is purely the reflection of extraordinary scientific advances that have been made in the vaccine platform over the years, because of which we were able to produce this vaccine in a short period of time, comparing to normal vaccines that they take for years. There is definitely no compromise in safety. Tonight we have excellent panel of renowned physicians to discuss about the safety and efficacy of the vaccine, and to educate all of us why it is so important to take the vaccine. So without a further ado, I would like to ask the panel to give a brief remarks, and followed by a question and answer session. So I'd like to first introduce Dr. Vishnu Chandi. Dr. Chandi is currently the chairman of COVID-19 task force of the Chicago Medical Society. He's a renowned infectious disease specialist for over 30 years in the Chicagoland. He's a senior partner with Metro Infectious Disease Consultant since 1995, which is one of the largest infectious disease groups in the US. So Dr. Chandi was trained at Rush Medical Center during the time of this HIV pandemic, which happened, as we know, which happened in the early 90s. He was extensively involved in organizing initial workshops at the beginning of the pandemic in India with the Public Health Foundation of India. He also provides technical advice to Share India as part of CDC grant, which has been funded for over 20 years. His interests are, delivery models for underfunded societies, tropical medicine, infection control, HIV, and right now he has been speaking on various platforms about COVID-19. And with that, Dr. Chandi, I would like to give you a few remarks.
He's on mute.
That's Chini.
Oh, Dr. Tucky, you have to unmute yourself.
It's down here. Boy, between Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all of these platforms, I've become quite the geek here with this. So thank you, Representative Davis, for having us. One of the things as a physician that I struggle with, which I come home and I think about a lot, because I think Dr. Johnson, Dr. Lynn, Dr. Reddy, I see Dr. Pete here, and my friend Dr. Banyan, is really, we come home, we work, and then like I just finished seeing COVID and everyone else just an hour ago. My background is infectious diseases. I got into this because, and HIV started out, the saddest thing I saw was parents coming to bury their kids. And that's why I could never do pediatrics, for one thing. The second thing that really made me sad was when your children die, your hope dies. And even without HIV and without pandemic, I would watch when I work in the areas on the west side of Chicago, the gun violence, and I would watch grandmas come mourn death of their young Black and brown children. And I would go home and I would hug my kids a little tighter because it would really change the way I think about what I did that day, because I didn't have to go through that. Yet we see that constantly. First pandemic with HIV brought that home across the board. And this pandemic, we're watching the same thing unfold in different age populations, where we're watching people pass away at a rate I have never seen before. It's like leaves coming off a tree in fall. You'd go in one day, and in one day we'd lose 5 or 6 patients in a day. I'd never experienced that before. And as an active physician in the community that's seeing anywhere from 30 to 50 patients a day, depending on how busy it is, and unfortunately it's busier, to watch this carnage that's taking place is unacceptable, I think, to almost every physician who practices. And that's why we're here today. I think all of us who are sitting here on our free time are here because we care. We care not because you're Black or brown or Hispanic, but we care about life. Life is precious. And we get one shot at it as far as I know right now. And we got to make the most of it, and we have to take care of those all around us, those who have means, those who don't have means. And this pandemic kind of brought out all of the inequities that are going on. Can I do my talk now, or should I wait for a later period of time, Dr. Reddy?
I think you should do the talk right now, and then we'll take that question.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen with the slides, and then we can go from there. Screen. Share screen. Uh-oh, this is not working. Let's see. Share. Can you see my slides?
No.
Not yet.
You can't see any of these slides yet?
No.
Because it's saying it's sharing. I know there's a delay.
Hey, Nikki, do you or Dr. Reddy need to share their screen?
Vishnu, did you click on your slide first?
It's open for them to share. It's completely open, but I'm going to go on my end. Yeah, it's been open since we started, so I'm going to go in the back and see what the problem is. But if it's telling him that it's sharing, it's just slow. It's going to catch up.
So let me start off anyway as their sharing process going, and let's talk about these vaccines. So everyone talks about these vaccines being developed so quickly, but these vaccines did not develop overnight. This process has been going on for almost 20 years. And this mRNA technique started out with HIV, where we were trying to figure out HIV vaccines, which didn't work out so well. But this mRNA platform actually has to do with two different viruses, which we've forgotten about now, which are Zika virus, which caused all those babies to be born all over the world with birth deformities, and another virus. And the platform was developed to fight Zika, but Zika went away. And then these two companies, which are making the vaccine, Moderna and Pfizer, but it's really not Pfizer. There's another company from Germany that actually made the vaccine that Pfizer bought. Are the two vaccines that have come before. And these companies have been doing this for many years, and luckily for them, these vaccines came in, and these vaccines, interestingly, were able to be developed very quickly because they had everything ready except an infection, and the world was then caught up with this coronavirus, and the infection came out, and we were able to sequence the virus within literally a week of this virus coming out, and that was shared by the Chinese. And within 72 hours, the National Institutes of Health was able to identify the important part of this virus, which was the one that makes the antigens and the antibodies, and they shared it, and the vaccine was developed literally within 60 days, where you were able to take it's basically like a Lego set. The only thing that was missing was that one piece that made the car move in the Lego set, as we're all building Legos as boys. And they were able to put that little piece together, which was that spike protein that Dr. Reddy talked about. And this technique was developed over 20 years, but it was able to be deployed within 60 days. And the first person got an injection of this trial within 60 days. So the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, had this vast platform for many, many years, from the HIV days of research clinical trial experience, and even before that. And they were able to deploy this very quickly. And basically, we were able to conduct a trial which took a decade within 6 months. So nothing was compromised in the manner of the type of trial that was done, the phases of the trial, the phase 1, the phase 2, phase 3 trials, and now we're in phase 4, and nor safety regulations compromised. The trial, phase 1, meaning, is this safe in humans? Phase 2, what is the dose that's required, and is it safe again? And phase 3, which is to try it out in human beings to say, does it work or not? Were all conducted, and the same time this was going on, the federal government took the risk away from these companies. They bet on 5 different companies, and 2 companies have been successful, Moderna and Pfizer. 2 have actually not been successful thus far, and a third is trying to be successful. So 2 out of 5 ain't bad. Before, that's as the old song goes. Here, 2 out of 5 isn't bad at all. So the approval process did not change at all. The safety requirements were unchanged in any of this. And because you had a pandemic, you were able to recruit vast numbers of people because everybody was desperate to get something done. The Pfizer vaccine recruited, as you see, is the screen available?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the Pfizer vaccine had 43,651 participants, if you can see that screen, and they were followed for 2 months. The Moderna vaccine had 30,420 participants that were followed for 2 months. So now, why do you say 2 months? Because almost 99% of the significant side effects occur within 6 weeks. And then what they found was that this vaccine, if you ask 10,000 infectious disease doctors, which is all the infectious disease doctors in this country, if they would have a vaccine that gave you 95% efficacy with this side effect profile, you could basically knock them down with a feather, because nobody would expect this sort of excellent vaccine. And this is exactly what happened. And the major side effects that you saw were these 2 reactions in Britain, and now you're hearing this whole host of things of people passing out. But nobody has died. Now we've delivered multiple millions of doses of vaccine. And we have not had any deaths. We have not had any significant neurological issues. You've had some reactions to this fatty layer that you require for that vaccine to get into your body. And it's very, very effective vaccine. It's a very, very safe vaccine. So the two big differences between the vaccine are the Pfizer vaccine requires really, really cold temperatures because it breaks down quickly, minus 70 degrees Celsius. And the Moderna vaccine is basically like a regular vaccine that the doctor's offices could store at minus 20. The Pfizer vaccine, once you thaw it out, it's good for 5 days in the freezer. Doses are different. So the Moderna vaccine is going to be easier to give. As far as how good it is, both vaccines are very safe. You do get some pain. I got my vaccine dose 2 weeks ago. Actually, less than 2 weeks ago, 12 days ago. And there's a small amount of pain at the vaccine site. I had a little bit of chills and a little bit of fever the next day, and I took some Motrin, and I felt fine. The Moderna vaccine and I got the Pfizer vaccine. The Moderna vaccine causes some headache a little bit more than the Pfizer vaccine. There's some things called Bell's palsy that was seen in the vaccinated group, but nothing more than the background, what you would normally expect when you have so many people, because Bell's palsy is not uncommon. Nobody died. There was some swelling of lymph nodes. So it's an unbelievably safe vaccine. So who do you use it for? Both of these vaccines have two things in common. They need 2 doses. And why is that a big deal? It makes it so much harder to give the vaccine when you have to bring the person back to get the second dose. So the Pfizer vaccine is indicated for people over 16 years of age, the Moderna 18 years of age. And Moderna vaccine is not as great. Both vaccines are great. One is less great, okay? It's like Michael Jackson and Shaquille O'Neal. Okay, you both want them on your team, but the Chicagoans would want Michael Jackson. I think the Los Angeles Lakers would want the Shaq. So both are great, but over 65, the Moderna, if you're over 65 years of age, and I think, I don't want to put dispersions, but it looks like Danny Davis maybe a little bit over 65. You would probably want the Pfizer vaccine because it's a little bit better over 65. Other than that, there's no differences in race. It affects the African American population as well as the white population. There's no difference, and there was no real death protection as such because the numbers were small. The headaches are a little bit more in Moderna. I don't want to go through this graph, but you can see the Pfizer vaccine starts helping you a little bit earlier than the Moderna vaccine, but both have about up here 95% protection. So the next problem with all of this is, how do you get people to believe what I just said? Okay. We want people to take the vaccine because they believe it's really good for them. Vaccines, along with toilets, believe it or not, have saved more people than anything else in the world. My own family in India, where I grew up, polio was rampant. One of my partners had polio. There was a child that died before me between my older sister and I. All of my cousins have had at least 1 or 2 siblings that passed away in their generation from infections. That doesn't happen anymore. And the only reason why this doesn't happen anymore is because of vaccines. I have 2 children. We did not lose a child between 2 children. And that's the American experience now. But within one generation, in the 1940s and 50s, we had gobs of hospitals with iron lungs because we had people with polio. We had people with diphtheria. As a resident, I remember every wintertime we would have people with meningitis, kids with meningitis die. We don't see that anymore. And that's not because we've suddenly become better doctors. It's because of vaccines. Vaccines are the most important public health thing that's happened in the last 200 years. They have saved more lives than anyone else. So why is this message being garbled? It has a lot to do with people not believing what physicians, public health authorities say. So it's really important that we get people like Danny Davis, who's been out in the community, and all the other people that are in the African American community to believe this message, understand the message, digest the message, and become one of these trusted leaders in the community after they satisfy themselves with what we've said. And examples of these, what we call trusted messengers, are local doctors that work in your community, school nurses, pastors, community leaders, including what I've learned is barbershops. Apparently, the barbershops are a big deal because that's where a lot of the talk goes on. I work in the West Side. And one of the things that's always astounded me is, I'll go see somebody, a lot of times with HIV or something else, and they don't believe what I say. And I say to them, look, why would I ever tell you something that would harm you? I am your doctor. I work for you. I don't work for some health system. I don't work for the government. I work for you. And it's really important to understand, I think for everyone to understand that as physicians, our first and most important thing is to take care of our patients and then take care of our community. And I think that's where we all come from. There is a significant importance with context. It's both political, social, and experimental. And as if we watched over the last 4 years, the greatest tragedy of the last 4 years has been this loss of trust in the people that you should trust. Because the loss of this, where you don't know what's real and what's not, and the internet putting out all of these fake things that are not real. Science is real. We try to work based on what we know at this time. And there was a Dr. Abhijit Banerjee, who was a Nobel Prize winner for economics from Harvard. Peer effects really work. What you and what people think around you is real, and it works. Getting the word out and the agents of change really does work. And everyone should be talking about taking the vaccine in the community, because if you look at the age of death for COVID, for Latinos, Latinx, Hispanic population, whatever that the group is called, Latinx, the average age of death is in the late 60s, I think 67, 68. African Americans, it's 72, 73. For Caucasians, it's about 80, 82 actually. So there's a difference in age where people die because of COVID-19. And it's really, really important that COVID-19 be taken seriously. And vaccine now is really the miracle that's out there. As Danny Davis said, it's really a miracle that's come through. It's a gift from God right now. So what do we know? The vaccine is safe. We know it's effective. We need two doses, and we don't have enough doses for this country right now as we have it. And so we've got to get everybody charged up in the highest, in the areas that are the most affected, which are the African American community, which we're speaking to now, and the underserved community. Our group also works in Detroit. We work in Atlanta. We work in Kansas City. We work in Alabama. And I can tell you, we work 6 miles from the CDC in one of the poorest hospitals in Atlanta. And that hospital is, funny it is predominantly African American. I don't find it funny at all, because the disparity in care over there and the fact that you can't get great care when you're 6 miles away from the CDC in Atlanta speaks volumes to where the faults in the health systems lie. So there are some things that we do know, things that we don't know. How long will the vaccine protect you? We think for years, but we don't know that yet. Will vaccine prevent transmission of infections? We don't know, but we think it does. The use in children, we think it's safe, but that's not been proven. Pregnancy and lactation, we'll talk about, Dr. Lin will talk about that. And long-term side effects, we really don't know, but this is the safest type of vaccine that's ever been developed. And so I would really hope that this message gets out, that it's really safe. There is no black or white vaccine. This is a vaccine for all people, because color is only skin deep, and we've got to get over our prejudices and work together to make sure that this really works. And so I'll stop there and let the rest of the speakers talk, and then we can have a discussion about some of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chandy. Thank you for that intermediate remarks. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Johnson. Dr. Daniel Johnson is a professor of pediatrics, section chief of pediatric infectious disease, University of Chicago Medicine. Dr. Johnson is also a member of Chicago Medical Society COVID-19 Task Force, educating providers and teachers on COVID. He's also director of ECHO Chicago program, which was founded in 2010, focused on improving access to quality healthcare for underserved populations using an asset-based approach, and also a telehealth program by using a high-grade video conferencing technology to diagnose and manage some of the common chronic complex health conditions. Dr. Johnson?
Thank you, Dr. Reddy, for that introduction, and thank you, Representative Davis, for inviting us to speak tonight. I'm happy to be here. I'm a native Chicagoan, in fact, a native Southsider, having spent all but 14 of my 65 years living in Chicago and living on the South Side in South Shore and the High Park neighborhood. I've worked across the South Side through the University of Chicago and across the West Side when I was chair of pediatrics at Mount Sinai. I'm a pediatrician and a pediatric infectious disease specialist, and I work daily with vaccines. It's one of my areas of expertise. And first and foremost, I just want to share that I was immunized now about 10 days ago, and I was excited to be immunized because this is an immunization that works. And it was one way in which not only I could protect myself, but I could also protect my family from the pain that they would feel if I got sick from COVID-19. I'm in a high-risk group, being 65, and it would scare them. It would unsettle them. And knowing that I've been immunized has already lowered their stress level, something very important these days when we're talking about life during the COVID-19 era. It didn't hurt when I got it. My arm, just like Dr. Chundy, got sore the next day. And by the third day, I was fine. No other symptoms. And in fact, that's what happens to most people. And I'm very confident that it's safe. Many people, as you know, have mentioned that it's a new technology. Dr. Chundy talked about the fact that it's been around for 20 years. And it really does have an excellent safety record. The vaccine enters the body and it's gone from the body by 10 days. After that 10 days, the immune system takes over in order to protect you. And it builds protection. That's the job of the immune system. And as a result, it keeps people from getting significantly ill from COVID-19. We don't know yet how long that protection will last. We believe that it should last for months, perhaps even a couple of years. But it's too soon to say. We don't have the knowledge yet to be able to answer that kind of question. We do know that it can't be incorporated into a person's genes. It's an RNA vaccine. RNA doesn't get incorporated into the body's DNA. So it will not be incorporated into your genes. Part of the reason why it's so important that you understand that difference between RNA and DNA. DNA does make up our genes, RNA doesn't. This vaccine has been tested in as many people as a typical vaccine trial. It came to market in a much shorter time period. And why? Demand, the sense of urgency. After all, COVID-19 causes significant harm. The extent of number of people being infected meant then that it was much easier to be able to do the testing that was necessary to be able to prove that the vaccine worked. And then there was an amazing amount of funding that allowed the process to move very quickly, because for most vaccines, there isn't a lot of funding. And so it moves much slower because there are many people asking questions about, will the money be there to move to the next step? But with these vaccines, the money was definitely there. When we think about vaccines, we think, of course, about their safety, but we also are weighing the risk associated from the disease. And I don't think I need to dwell too long on what the risk is from this virus. Sure, there are many people who get it who don't get sick. But depending on your age, your risk of hospitalization is under about 1% for children, but up to as high as 20% to 30% for adults. Hospitalization isn't just an overnight stay for most or for many of the people. It's a few days to a few weeks. But nothing like that has happened in people who've received vaccines. There's been a handful of people who were hospitalized because of an allergic reaction. It was overnight. They all did well. Nobody's been hospitalized for days to weeks. People who get COVID-19 often have chronic medical problems afterwards, weeks to months. It happens in about 20 to 30% of people who are infected. So this isn't a rare thing. 20 to 30% of people have long-term problems lasting weeks to months. Nothing like that has happened with the vaccine. Zero. People now, as Dr. Chundy mentioned, hundreds of thousands to millions. And we're not seeing any kind of long-term problems. We're not seeing hospitalizations. So we'll talk more with your questions. That's really what we want to try and get to. It's most important to answer what you want to know about tonight. I'm just happy to be here to be able to talk with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I like to invite Dr. Bonnie Pete Thomas. Dr. Thomas is currently the medical director of HIV clinic and pre-exposure prophylaxis clinic at Near North Health Services. He spent 20 years at Cook County Health and Hospital Systems and was medical director of the Woodlawn Health Center and Project Brotherhood, a Black man's clinic. He was also featured on CNN's Blacks in America Part 2, Project Brotherhood, The Solutions, as today's pioneer in healthcare. He's a frequent speaker on health inequities, HIV and opioid use disorders in urban communities. He's an experienced leader, clinician, and public health professional focused on providing equitable care for people living with HIV. Dr. Thomas?
Well, I am extremely happy and honored to be on this panel with you guys. I appreciate Representative Danny Davis's leadership in providing a platform to improve the health of our community. Like many of my colleagues, this pandemic has been a challenging one. And I think what comes to mind is it was an extreme stress test for our health system. And it exposed many, flaws in our system that I think many of my colleagues would not be surprised at, but it really shocked and has put a significant impingement in our system, especially with regard to our patients. So as Dr. Reddy said, I cut my teeth at Cook County. I was able to work with Project Brotherhood with the likes of Linda Murray, Terry Mason, Dr. Eric Whitaker. And one of the things that I learned quickly is, as a community physician, you have to think like a public health person, that many of the health inequities that exist from social conditions. And so as we think about the World Health Organization statement on social determinants of health, it says that poor conditions lead to poorer health. An unhealthy material environment and unhealthy behaviors have a direct harmful effect. But worries and insecurities of daily life and the lack of supportive environments have also a significant influence. And so, the WHO, described it perfectly, because on the south side of Chicago, where we did Project Brotherhood, we found that those higher rates of cancer, HIV, hypertension were all in the same areas where there was lack of jobs, lack of housing, poor educational opportunities. And so then we come into this pandemic where we're finding out that many of those same communities, those same ethnicities are also being significantly hit and share a significant burden of disease by COVID-19. So what I desire to do is to improve the community's awareness, increase their data sets. I'm reminded this week I had a medical student with me in my office, and I had a 60-year-old Black woman eloquently describe to me why she was not going to take this vaccine. And she talked about history. And then very quickly she moved to, but she said, Dr. Thomas, it's not just about history. It's about George Floyd. It's about Susan Moore. She mentioned the African-American physician that died in Indiana. She mentioned recent events. So our patients are validated. They're tying together our history of discrimination, a history that is continual. And so I think as medical professionals, we have to not dismiss our patients' concerns. We have to acknowledge them and yet add to the data points, because I simply said, everything you're saying is true. I'm not denying that racial discrimination does not exist. I'm not denying that the Tuskegee experiment did not exist. What I'm saying is that here's another set of data points that I want you to make your decision on. And I start to talk about some of the things that Dr. Chandi talked about, the efficacy of these vaccines and how hardly hit our community is. So I said, I want you to make a decision based on the complete data set. I'm also reminded that the WHO definition of health says that health is a complete state of mental, physical, and social well-being, not merely the absence of disease. And so we can't think about disease just in terms of the particular organ systems that are challenged by COVID. We got to think about disease as lack of education, lack of access to healthcare, lack of economic opportunities, because those same communities, once COVID is over with, we're still left with those health inequities that we have to deal with as a community. So I'm excited to take the community's questions, and I'm honored to be a part of this panel.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. I'd like to invite Dr. Lynn. Dr. Edward Lynn is currently a trustee of the Chicago Medical Society, an active member of Chicago Medical Society COVID-19 Task Force, educating providers and teachers since the beginning of this pandemic. He's also a member of the Village of Skokie Board of Health. He's the former professor and chair of Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at Rush Medical Center. And prior to that, he also served as a chairperson of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology for Cook County Health. When he was the chair of the Cook County Health, he was responsible for directing and coordinating the provision of gynecologic services throughout the facilities of the Cook County Health System. Dr. Lynn has contributed extensively to the scientific literature and has lectured locally and nationally on a wide range of women health topics with recent focus on infectious diseases and COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Lynn?
Thank you very, very much. I'm extremely honored to be invited to be part of this panel. I just want to add a little bit more about my background. As Dr. Johnson pointed out, I too am a native Chicagoan, was born at what was, in my opinion, a legendary hospital, Michael Reese Hospital. And I later returned there to do my residency following my graduation from the University of Chicago Medical School. So I lived in the South Side. Worked in the South Side at Michael Reese for over a decade. But even prior to that, I was a young undergraduate student doing virology research at what was called Presbyterian St. Luke's Hospital, and now known as Rush. And so I've always had an orientation in this area. Little did I know that I'd be resurrecting my interest because of this pandemic. I also want to touch on a very important point that Dr. Thomas was making. A therapeutic relationship is based on mutual trust. Patients have to trust their doctors, and the doctors have to trust their patients. So it's very important, and what I always try to teach is that we respect and understand where the patients are coming from, because otherwise we're not going to be working together. And it's a partnership to try to ensure everyone's best outcome. And that's why I'm here tonight. I'm going to be talking about women's health, specifically with relationship to this vaccine. I'm going to try to share my screen. I don't know how successful I'm going to be.
So if you reach a problem, I'm here. I'll go in the back and do it manually. Just remember to tell me next slide.
Yeah. All right. So far, okay, we're getting there. I think we're gonna. Are you able to see my slides now?
Not yet.
Okay, fine. So, as Dr. Chundy pointed out, vaccines are one of the greatest public health achievements in the 20th century. And before the widespread use, people died of these diseases, which we now think about often from a historical perspective because we're just not seeing it. And the incredible scientific effort that went into creating these vaccines is also of historic proportions. And I just want to point out to people in the audience, we somewhat take the flu vaccine for granted. But as you know, historically, influenza was a killer of people. And I was reminded of this not that long ago when I was at Stroger Hospital, and the H1N1 pandemic occurred across the globe. And we were seeing pregnant women routinely going to the intensive care unit, routinely having to be put on ventilators. I know of one case that it got so severe she had to be put on literally heart-lung bypass and was transferred to Rush. And because that was an extremely virulent form of the flu. And I was determined at that point to make sure that all of our patients who were receiving obstetrical care in our system were vaccinated. And it was very difficult because we learned there was a lot of suspicion in the community about influenza. There was a lot of suspicion in the community from healthcare providers who questioned whether or not this was the right thing to do. But now we're faced with a very, very difficult disease. The American College of OBGYN just came out with these recommendations a little over a week ago. So this is pretty much hot off the presses. Now, one thing you have to know is that we don't have really strong, hard evidence about the use of these vaccines in pregnancy because pregnant women weren't purposefully enrolled in the studies. We do know that women became pregnant while they were in the studies, and these women are being followed. And to date, there has not been any documented adverse effect. But more importantly, and a paper just came out this past weekend, that women who are pregnant, who acquire this infection, who get the COVID-19 infection, typically do worse than women who are not pregnant. So the fact that a woman is pregnant makes them more susceptible to the severe form of disease. And we see that with other infections, including influenza. So for that reason, the American College strongly recommends not to withhold the vaccine from pregnant women and follow the standard recommendations. Now we know that women have to make their own decision. It's critical, and I'm hoping that healthcare providers will take the time to counsel their patients. Again, The disease is much worse in reality than any theoretical concerns we may have about the vaccine. We should be looking at how prevalent the infection is in the community. And as you know, right now, it's prevalent. In Illinois, it looks like things may be improving, but we are really concerned about the holiday season that things may start to go up again. We do know that the vaccine appears to be unbelievably effective. And there is no scientific evidence to date that the vaccine is dangerous either to the mom or to the developing fetus. Another big important area is women who are breastfeeding. And again, the American College has strongly recommended that vaccines be offered to women who are breastfeeding, just like to non-breastfeeding women, in the same way. And we said that limitation that these vaccines were not tested purposefully in lactating women, but we do know that women have had babies, have been vaccinated, and have been doing very well. And the last bullet point on this slide, the theoretical concerns regarding the safety of vaccinating breastfeeding individuals do not outweigh the benefits. And I keep on emphasizing that because we always make these determinations, risk versus benefit. In this case, benefit is much, much greater than any potential risk. Now, another large group of women are reproductive age women who are considering getting pregnant. And this is good news here. We recommend strongly that they get vaccinated and do not avoid vaccines simply because you're trying to get pregnant. There's no reason to delay pregnancy after receiving the vaccine. And the reason I'm stressing that is because you may think back about a very common childhood disease at one time was German measles or rubella. And we always check rubella immunity when women become pregnant or are contemplating getting pregnant because we want to vaccinate them before they become pregnant. The difference is the rubella vaccine is a virus vaccine. It's actually a virus that is given to the patient. The COVID-19 vaccinations, as we pointed out, do not contain any virus, whether it be living, attenuated, killed. It doesn't. It's a small portion of messenger RNA, which tricks the body into producing antibodies against those proteins in that spike that we were talking about before. So there's no virus given, and therefore it's very, very safe. Now, the CDC has set up a program, and we're urging all people who become pregnant after receiving the vaccine within 30 days to join it because they really want to know how you're doing. It's a survey, and they're trying to make it easy, and those people interested can check the CDC under VSafe. I thank you for your patience. I look forward to answering any additional questions that may come up. And again, I thank Representative Davis and his staff for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on what I think is a critically important topic for all of us.
Thank you, Dr. Lynn. I'd like to invite Dr. Banyan. Dr. David Banyan is an assistant professor, Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Rush Medical College. He's also a member of Chicago Medical Society COVID-19 Task Force, educating the providers about the mental health aspect of the COVID-19 pandemic. He's also the program director for Consultation Liaison Psychiatry at Rush University, also director of the Transplant Psychiatry Program. Dr. Banyan's primary goals is to eliminate mental health barriers in the COVID-19 pandemic and hesitancy of taking the vaccine. Dr. Banyan?
Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Reddy. It's my pleasure and honor to be here in partnership with Representative Davis and my fellow panelists and with you, our viewers, this evening to talk briefly about mental health or psychological aspects pertaining to the COVID-19 pandemic, and in particular, our discussion this evening about the COVID-19 vaccine. So I'm going to take a little bit of a different perspective here and talk about a four-letter F word that probably is not talked about enough. And that F word is fear. If we think about it, we've been living in substantial fear with different types of fear for the last number of months. In fact, perhaps we've become conditioned by all the types of struggles. Every aspect of life has been affected for everybody. And I want to start out by saying that fear in certain ways is helpful and in certain ways is totally unhelpful. And it's important that we distinguish which fear, which is a biological response. Fear is coded in our brain structures to protect us. So when we hear infectious disease experts and other experts telling us, and other physicians telling us about what's happening when people get COVID-19, you've heard about the reports about high rates of mortality, long-term negative effects even for people who survive, I think, as Dr. Johnson had pointed out. So when we think about fear and the virus, that is an adaptive fear. We should be afraid in terms of to protect ourselves from the virus. That is helpful. If we listen to the recommendations made, wear a mask, socially distance, make sure you practice good hand hygiene. That's the science. That's the science that helps keep us safe, helps keep our loved ones safe. So that kind of fear can be helpful to us. It helps us protect ourselves, make the right decisions to preserve our physical and mental health. But the kind of fear that happens over the long term, especially as has been pointed out with different types of injustices, inequities, mistrust, that can stoke a very long-term fear. And sometimes that fear costs us very important opportunities. And it's important we understand how does actually fear, how do we experience that? Why do we experience that? And how does that change how we think? Because fear is going to change how we think about anything. And what fear does is it causes us to use often emotional-based reasoning, or reasoning that's influenced by the past without taking information about the present. And I think my fellow panelists have done a great job in pointing this out. And so when we do that, we don't have the opportunity to really sit down and use certain parts of our brain, because the fear center of the brain causes other areas of the brain to essentially take a back seat. And one of the parts of the brain that takes the back seat is the front part of the brain. We have our frontal lobes. And the frontal lobes are what we call the executive directors. They are the parts that help, they are the parts of the brain that help us take in information. We think about it critically. We analyze it. We then ask questions about it. But fear, because it's designed for us to make an instant decision, makes that part of the brain not function as well. And so we're in this heightened fear response for a variety of reasons, both from the virus itself, but all the havoc it's wreaked in our daily lives, social, economic, all these things. So I think it's really, really important that we all be aware of kind of the psychological impact things have had. Whether you've been watching the news, reading individuals' personal opinions or posts on, Twitter or Facebook or any number of social media platforms. News is designed, and the newspapers are designed to sell papers and get readership. And sometimes that's designed to stoke fear and not necessarily convey the best information. So I think that it's very, very important that we take this opportunity, and in terms of fears that we have about the vaccine, that we think about it differently, and we might say, I need to be educated about this vaccine. I need to empower myself with knowledge. Knowledge is the antidote to fear, and knowledge from the right people, such as physicians, infectious disease experts, your personal physician that you have a relationship with, who you may have known for a long time. That is very, very important that we set aside, and we do our best to set aside with the fear and think about, what do I need to know? What's the information that's going to help me make the best decision? And I think that that's part of the spirit of the panel this evening, is to make sure that the right information is getting to the right people at the right time. And so I won't take too much longer. I could probably spend an hour talking about this subject, but I do want to mention one more thing, because I know we want to get to the question and answer period. And that is that getting infected with the virus, as psychiatrists are realizing, and other physicians are realizing when they're providing care to patients who are hospitalized, especially patients who are hospitalized, but also patients who may have never been hospitalized with after getting COVID-19, there are neuropsychiatric, meaning it affecting the brain and having secondary psychological effects to the virus. And I personally have seen these cases, such cases in the hospital. So it is important. Oftentimes we talk about just general physical health, but there are potential long-term consequences in terms of psychological and emotional health directly associated with the virus. And we don't understand exactly why that's happening. That should be something that you take into consideration as well as you're weighing the risks and the benefits. So I hope that this has been a bit of a crash course in understanding kind of some of the psychological aspects about how we've been impacted over the past number of months. And I hope that this will help you get the information and be open to getting the information that you need from the right source and from the right at the right time from the right people. And I'd be delighted to answer any questions that come up as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Banyan. No, that was great, informative talk. We have multiple questions that we received today, and there are some live questions coming in too. So I'll get started with the first question, which is how do clinical trials actually work, and how do they come up with the data to know that it is truly safe for the general public? Anyone? Dr. Johnson, I guess? Or,
Sure, I'm very happy to talk about that. It's a very good question, because certainly as people try to make decisions about vaccination, they need to understand the process and the way in which vaccines are approved. Is it goes through a phased process. With phase one being testing that's done in a small number of people in order to look for any major immediate side effects. It's sort of a proof of concept as well. It's used to also see whether or not the vaccine in a small number of people can actually lead to an appropriate response. Phase two studies then expand that, always with an eye on looking at details around response as well as details around safety. But it's really the phase three trials that answer the biggest question. And that's because phase three trials involve the largest number of people. As many of you have read in the papers, I'm sure, or heard on the radio, 40,000 people are involved in these trials, both with the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines. That's the level of number of people that are involved in these phase three trials. And they really give us the answer about small side effects as well as large side effects. And one of the things that we've learned from years of creating vaccines is that almost all the side effects for vaccines that are not living vaccines. So we put aside the live virus vaccines and we just focus on the vaccines that are made from inert products. So they're not alive. And that's the case of the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines. So what we've learned from those previous vaccine trials is that within 6 weeks, we see the wide range of side effects that you're going to see. And this is part of the reason why 2 months was such an important number with the current COVID vaccines that are available. Because after 2 months, we will have seen all the side effects, at least based on previous experience with vaccinations. And so we've gone through a very rapid process because of the ability to be able to do it, the ability to be able to do things simultaneously because of the commitments that were made to deal with an urgent and emergent problem like this one. But that phase 3 trial was the same as all other vaccine trials. And by going through that phase 3, this is what's led us to be able to understand what the risk and what the benefits are associated with these vaccines. And it's the reason why we on this panel and others are so confident of the safety of these vaccines.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. One of the other questions that we received tonight, can anyone tell us the diversity rate of the clinical trials and if one vaccine is more favorable than the other? Dr. Chandi?
Yeah, actually, the trials were really good in having a diverse population. Both trials had about 10% African American representation, a little over 20% Latino population, about 4% Asian population, and the rest were what are classified as Caucasian population. So it really represents America to a broad swath to the best degree you can. And it was very well done. I mean, I was shocked at how well the trials were done. So we have great confidence in the way the population and the diversity of the population was represented. Now, you have to understand, when vaccine trials are done, there's a problem with all of this. The problem is that people who participate in vaccine trials are people who are motivated to participate in vaccine trials. So there's an inherent bias to it. So these are the people who are going out of their way to get the injection, follow up, and do these things. So it isn't truly representative of the rest of America, but from a statistical perspective, it's a really great representation as far as race, ethnicity, gender. I think there were a little bit more women than men, but for the most part, it was America the way it is. So it was a really good trial.
Thank you, Dr. Chandi. You know, this is a tough question that I got, a live question that we just received it. Let's keep it correct. The medical community as well as the federal government has not treated the Black community correctly. How can we get past this fear and distrust?
I think that's why we're here.
And Dr. Tom?
Yeah, I would say I think as a medical community, we need to acknowledge our past history, acknowledge the present history of discrimination and racial biases that African Americans experience on a daily basis, and then help to educate, and then help to inform the community about the benefits, and that yes, one can be true and the other can also be true, and that we need to avoid having the appearance of some sort of undue coercion, right? So we don't want to sound like used car salesmen, but we do want to be very clear about the benefits and what happens if you do and what happens if you don't. Many of those communities are very keen and are very aware. Many of their church members, family members. One of my physician colleagues has lost 15 members of his own family. And so I think we need to describe what happens if you decide to make the decision not to get this vaccine. Well, That might be a good decision for you, but here's the results of that. The result of that could be you could lose 15 family members. Is that something you want to risk? I think we have to educate, but yet not
I think
sound
the
like a
other
used car salesman.
aspect of that, I take the position that everything begins with self. I'm saying it's hard to get a splinter out of the government's eye if you've got a beam in your own. And so as I wrestle with these questions, I first think of myself because I am the government. I am the medical profession if I'm a physician or if I do something else. So if it is to be, let it begin with me. I can't lead where I don't go, and I can't teach what I don't know. And so before I can get government right, I gotta be right. Before I can get the medical profession right, I gotta be right. So everything begins with self. And if we take it from that vantage point, just imagine if each individual decides that I'm going to treat the Black community right. I'm going to make sure that every patient is treated right. If I'm a policeman, I'm going to make sure that every person I come into contact with is treated right with dignity and respect. I think the government will follow right behind it. So that's my answer to that question. I think the government will follow right behind.
Yeah, I would just like to say, one of my nursing assistants, Kendra, I was rounding in the intensive care unit, and she'd literally watched 20 people die in the last 2 months in the ICU there. And I said, hey, Kendra, it was all exciting because the vaccine was there that week. And I said, are you getting vaccine? And she says to me, she lives in the West Side, right near Loretto. And she says to me, I'm not getting the vaccine. I said, Kendra, I've known you for 20 years. Why wouldn't you get a vaccine that can save your life? And I went through the statistics just like we did now. Spent about 20 minutes with her. She goes, I've watched my people get killed by drugs, by bullets, and I don't trust this. I said, do you trust me? He goes, yeah, I trust you. And I said, well, why would I say anything to you that I'm telling my family to take the vaccine? And she says, she thought about it for a while, and it was what Dr. Banyan just said. She went over the fear factor, and then her frontal lobe started working. And I said, look at all around you. You've got death and stuff going around you because of this COVID. And then she took a deep breath and said, yeah, I'm getting the vaccine tomorrow. She went ahead and did it. Because it took that time and effort and that conversion and getting over her fear at what she's experienced. So it's hard. It's not easy.
Thank you, Dr. Chandy. One of the other questions that we got today is, I guess today's news has announced that a Colorado man has been detected with a highly contagious strain of COVID-19. Will any comment on it, and will the current vaccine still protect us?
You want to take that, Dan?
Sure, I'm happy to talk about that for a few minutes. So viruses change, and they're trying to do what any person would do, which is in response to the environment, they want to be able to be stronger. do better. And that's what viruses are trying to do. So the virus has changed. And the way it's changed is that it is more contagious. But like all of us, there's only so much change that we can make. And the amount of change that this virus has made it more contagious, but not more deadly. It has made it more contagious, but not able to sidestep the vaccine. So the vaccine does work against that virus. The virus will be neutralized by the vaccine so that someone who's received the vaccine doesn't have to worry right now about it making them sicker. And the fact that the virus is more contagious is actually one more reason to argue that getting the vaccine is a good idea, because you even more so need to be protected from this virus in order to make sure that you protect yourself and your loved ones. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. One of the other questions in reference to the actual vaccine itself, Pfizer and Moderna are reporting 94 to 95%, and AstraZeneca is reporting that they are at 70 to 75%. The question is, why are we even considering AstraZeneca vaccine?
So the AstraZeneca vaccine is a 2-dose vaccine. Again, it's a much easier vaccine to give because it doesn't require cold storage. Efficacy that they're showing a 66% to upwards of close to 90% has to do with the type of dosing that they give. The reason why you need to consider it is you have more than 6 billion people in this world to vaccinate. We don't have enough vaccine for the rest of this world. This cold chain is very difficult to do even in developed countries, and in underserved areas, it's much harder to do. So you need all different types of vaccines for all different situations. The AstraZeneca vaccine is a perfectly good vaccine. The flu vaccine is at best 50%, maybe 60% in a great year. We need to get herd immunity into this country and upwards of 80%. If the virus, as the virus is becoming more transmissible, you're going to need more herd immunity. So the more vaccines you have that are safe and that work, the more vaccines we should use. It's not like we have a luxury of excessive amount of vaccines. You have to understand, we only have enough vaccine to vaccinate a little more than half of, maybe 2/3 of America right now. The rest of the world is competing for these vaccines. And so the Johnson & Johnson is a vaccine that's coming out, no relation to Dr. Daniel Johnson, but J&J vaccine is coming out. The other 2 vaccines have failed. The GSK vaccine and the Sanofi vaccine have not come through. So there's a lot of, it's not like we have a ton of vaccine floating around. We need this vaccine.
Thank you. One of the other questions is, what side effects should be looked for and noted after vaccinations? Dr. Lin?
The majority of the side effects are we call localized. So the patients will experience pain at the injection site, which is very, very common to most vaccines. Some people may experience what we call myalgias or muscle aches and pains, which feels kind of like you're coming down with something, and rarely may have even low-grade temperature elevation. I know that in the pregnant women, the concern was, well, if temperature elevation occurs, because that's not good for developing fetus, should we automatically put them on Tylenol when they receive the vaccine? And the answer is no. This is not that common, and we don't recommend routinely trying to prevent it from occurring. There were some very rare side effects that occurred, which appeared to be more of allergic reaction. As was mentioned earlier, the vaccine is in a little envelope that's made of lipid. That's how it gets into the body, and it appears that some components of that lipid envelope, certain people who are sensitive to it may have an allergic reaction. For that reason, everyone that gets the vaccine is asked to be observed for a minimum of 15 minutes, just in case something develops so they can be treated before they go home. If you have a history of allergies, then they usually ask you to wait a little bit longer. People that have a history of very severe allergies, requiring them to carry an EpiPen because they will, could go into shock if they have an allergic reaction. These people may not be appropriate candidates, and that becomes an individual discussion with their physicians prior to considering getting vaccinated. But for 99.9% of the population, nothing like that's going to occur.
Thank you, Dr. Lin. One of the other questions is this vaccine just markers to track the American people? Anyone to take this?
Yeah, I've been actually following some of these internet stuff that's been going on. It's very frustrating because this all started actually with a British gastroenterologist who said that autism is linked to vaccines. And that's been disproven to the nth degree by science, but it has not been disproven in the world of the internet as well as the anti-vaxxers. This has started the whole campaign. And the vaccine has no relationship to tracking anybody. Pfizer, in fact, didn't take any money from the federal government to develop the vaccines. There's nothing to do with, trying to hold on to people. We're just trying to make the society as safe as possible. For the biggest problem with these internet stories are people believe this because they're actually believing in all sorts of these conspiracy theories. You've got these QAnon people now who are colleagues with the Representative Danny Davis, and it's a sad state of affairs right now in the American public belief system. I think we as public health professionals have to go out there and state the effectiveness of vaccines, talk to everybody that we can touch, and become a trusted messenger. We need to engage the communities that we're doing tonight. We need to reach out to the barbershops out there and talk to the folks, because everybody's fairly smart. People are not stupid. People are not stupid out there. And if we talk sense and we are genuine in our belief system and come across as people who care, because I think we all do care. Otherwise, why are we sitting here on a Wednesday night when we can be spending time with our families? Because we care about the lives around us. It's a serious mission that we are. This is the one time in our lives as physicians we make a real difference to our communities that we serve. It's really important to understand this has nothing to do with tracking, folks. One of the big shortfalls and why we aren't able to get vaccine out there is we don't have a good system to have people sign up and track and get them to the local facilities, because everybody's afraid to sign up. Yet they're more than willing to go out to Facebook and give everything, including their underwear, to Facebook. What underwear they wear, what size they are, what they eat, what bra size they wear, every crazy stuff to Facebook and to Google. Yet here we are talking about the government tracking folks. I think people have to get a relationship of where we are and the stuff that we're giving out for free to all of these people that are collecting data on us. This has nothing to do with collecting data. We just want to do good. We want to take care of the people around us. I don't want to see grandmas die. I don't want to see people's lives taken away before their time. Dr. Johnson doesn't, Dr. Pete doesn't, Dr. Graham doesn't, Dr. Reddy doesn't, Dr. Lynn doesn't, nobody on this committee here, nobody on this phone call. I think the people listening want to see people die because of this. And I'd like to have Representative Danny Davis comment on this, because he represents all of us out here.
Well, the realities of life, and we talk about freedoms. And I often say that people have the freedom to express whatever it is they want to express, but they also have the freedom to be wrong. They also have the freedom to be irrelevant, and they also have the freedom to not be functioning in the best interest, not only of themselves, but also of others. And so, knowledge, my daddy used to say to us, interesting guy, finished fourth grade, but he was a great philosopher. And he used to say that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. He said you have to drink deep because shallow drinking intoxicates the brain. And so there are a lot of folks who get a little bit of information and, they take 101 psychology and they want to start diagnosing people and diagnosing and dissecting things. And so I think knowledge, as Dr. David suggested, is the antidote for fear. And the more knowledgeable we can help people become, then I think we're doing them a great service and doing ourselves one as well.
Thank you. One of the other questions is, what are the protocol for those with shellfish allergy? Dr. Johnson?
The only allergy of concern is to, in essence, the first dose, because the only allergy really of concern is, have you had a reaction that was life-threatening to the vaccine? There are a small number of people who have what's called anaphylaxis. Anaphylaxis is a severe reaction that leads to a drop in your blood pressure, difficulty breathing. It responds to the EpiPens that so many of us have already talked about tonight, and which most of you, I'm sure, have heard of, and to the use of antihistamines. But it does mean that you shouldn't get another dose of the vaccine if you've had that kind of reaction. So that would be the only group of individuals who should wholesale not get the vaccine. So if you have an allergy, seasonal allergies, no problem. Shellfish allergy, no problem. Other food allergies, no problem. There is no evidence that any of those allergies increase your risk of having a severe allergic reaction to the vaccine.
Thank you. One of the other questions, do you think women more than men will be inclined to get the vaccine? Dr. Lin?
Yeah, I feel qualified answering this since I devoted my career to providing care for women. And I'm going to be frank with my colleagues here. Early in my decision-making in medical school, I decided taking care of men wasn't any fun because they're always, giving you a hard time. So I learned, and I firmly believe that women are very inclined to take care of themselves. We know that in the United States of America, women make up the largest consumer of healthcare. About 60–70% of all encounters are women accessing the medical system. But most importantly, they make up over 80% of the decisions for their families and in their sphere of influence. Therefore, I'm very optimistic that women will realize that this is very important and will seek out the vaccine, but also will be guiding their loved ones, to take care of themselves. And I'm hoping that I'm correct, and that we see this. Just as an aside, and I'm quoting data that is compiled by the state of Illinois, but in my community, in our Board of Health reports, more women than men have become sick with COVID. Now, that also may mean that more women than men present to be diagnosed or to present to be tested. But I don't know if anyone else had any observation about whether or not women are more susceptible. I think that they tend to do better. But I'll leave that up to my infectious disease colleagues who care for them on a daily basis.
So the data shows that men are more susceptible to COVID than women. It has to do with a esoteric area called TMPRSS, which is a serine protease. But anyway, we won't get into that. But women, I know, having been married over 30 years, are much smarter than men across the board. Even though we have Nikki here, is the only woman up here, she's smarter than the rest of us on this panel. Women in India and Africa in HIV care are the ones that make most of the decisions, not just in HIV care, but for their whole families. It's across the board in every society, wherever you go. They make decisions of healthcare, they make decisions for well-being. And so women are going to seek out the vaccine more than men. They're going to make their men take the vaccine. Okay. Just the way life is. You got to accept it, guys, if you want to live healthy, long lives. The fear factor works here.
Thank you. Next question we got, was there any reaction known in the people who has lupus or sickle cell anemia?
You want to take that, Dr. Johnson?
Sure, happy to do so. Thank you very much. No, there's no increased incidence of reactions among that group. And actually, the group with lupus was looked at rather closely because there was concern. When the first mRNA vaccines came out, there was some evidence that they might increase the chance of what's called autoimmunity, which is the same thing that people with lupus have. But, you know, the beauty of technology is that we were able to figure out how to overcome that. And it's the royal we. Certainly, it wasn't me that figured this out. It was others who work in the field. And they figured out that if you take the mRNA and you put it inside a capsule of lipids, or what is a type of fat, that essentially eliminates this autoimmune problem. Because the autoimmune problem was coming up because the mRNA was naked when it was injected into people. And when you injected the mRNA naked, it meant you had to use an amazing amount of it. You had to use a very high dose in order to get some of it to the body's cells and be incorporated into the cells. But by putting it inside this little lipid sphere, you could use a much smaller amount. And by using the smaller amount, it eliminated the problem of autoimmunity. So there's been no evidence of autoimmunity. For sickle cell disease is not an autoimmune disease. So there's no reason to believe, there's no evidence that these vaccines would be handled any differently by someone with sickle cell disease versus someone with any other state of their health. We do know that people with sickle cell disease have one problem with their immune system, but thankfully it's not the part of the immune system that this vaccine interacts with. And so as a consequence, people with sickle cell disease should do as well as any others with any other medical problem. So it would appear that that is not a reason to be worried whatsoever about receiving the vaccine. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. So the next question that we got is, what is the current plan for distribution for the vaccine for the public? I guess, Dr. Johnson?
Sure. You know, the vaccine distribution is being set by the federal government. And the federal government has recommended that the vaccine be rolled out in phases. And the first phase has been focused on healthcare providers in order to protect that group, because if others get sick, they so much need healthcare providers in order to be able to survive COVID. And so the federal government made the decision that the focus should be on healthcare providers. After healthcare providers, the rollout will go to essential workers, along with people above the age of 75. And so that's the next group. And essential workers are defined by certain roles in society. The next phase will go to other essential workers, but this time people who have less contact with the public, as well as to people who are above the age of 65. And then after that, it will roll out to the rest of the public, but not children, because the vaccines that are available right now, the Moderna only goes down to age 18. The Pfizer goes down to age 16. The reason that Pfizer can go down to age 16 is because it was tested and a couple hundred people 16 and above. And there's so little difference between people who are 16 and people who are age 18 that the large data set with Pfizer was enough to be able to get down to age 16. We have not tested the vaccine in people below either vaccine, in fact, none of the vaccines, below people who are below the age of 16. So we'll have to wait on that group. But luckily, that's a group that rarely gets sick from COVID. And if they do get sick, rarely has severe disease. Even that unusual syndrome that we've seen called multi-system inflammatory syndrome of children, MISC, it's very rare, thankfully. And so right now, the group of children below the age of 16, because they haven't been looked at and because the risk is so low, it'll be probably not before the summer before the vaccine's available for that age group. So how long will it take to go through these phases? And what we anticipate is that the phase 1 group, which is the group of everybody who's I've mentioned who are not in the phase 2 group. And the phase 2 group are people who are under the age of 65 and not essential workers. It'll take going through phase 1 until probably March or April. And then starting in March or April will be the vaccination of people below the age of 65 who aren't essential workers down to age 16. And probably it'll take till September for that group to get fully vaccinated. So that's the timetable that's been set right now by the federal government, that we are all required at a state level to follow if we're going to follow the rules. Today, I heard that there are some states that have said they're not going to follow the rules. I can't say how the federal government will respond to that, but we in Illinois are following the rules that have been set by the federal government. I don't know, Representative Davis, if you want to comment any further on that.
No, I think the way in which the federal government has attempted to be as rational, as logical as one could possibly be. For example, you know, we're in that essential workers category. I got my vaccination last Sunday. I'm scheduled for my second round on the 10th of January. And I've had people call and, you know, raise the issue or raise the question, well, what's so essential about what you guys do? You're not medical personnel. And I said, well, you know, there are some of us who fit the age category as well. Practically all of that bunch in leadership, you know, a lot of them are up around 80 and so forth. So they kind of fit 2 or 3 categories. But I think there's been an effort to make it as fair, as rational And quite frankly, I think the governor in the state of Illinois, as well as the mayor, as well as our county board president, who are the top elected officials in our state, have done a very good job of providing leadership to try and respond as adequately as the state of Illinois can in relationship to how we handle this. So I'm okay with the decisions that have been made relative to distribution. I've got people in my office who, I mean, finally it was decided that each one of us could have two staffers who could get the vaccination. And there are people in the district office who want to know, why can't district offices be considered the same as people in DC? Or why did Senate staff get theirs first before House staff? And those questions are good. And I think people can keep raising any questions that they like to raise. And if they raise them enough, oftentimes there is a different response. For example, I know some senators who may have one position right now because of their circumstances. If it was not for the circumstances, they might have another position on some things. So I encourage people to raise any issue that they think ought to be raised, and it gets sorted out, and ultimately some decision gets made about it.
So I have a little different perspective on this. As a guy who's watching people die every day, we have 10 million doses of vaccine available. We've been only able to deploy a little over 1 million doses. I think that's unacceptable as a society. I think as a practicing physician who watches all of this drama unfold, the federal government has failed at every step of the way of being able to deploy the vaccine as quickly as they receive it to the people at large. I think the process has been fair of who they chose to give vaccine, but the deployment has been deplorable. And I think we can't wait until you get a appropriate federal response that matches what the states and the society needs. I think everyone's trying to be nice about this. I find it very hard to be nice about it when I watch people die every day who could be prevented. I think it's unacceptable.
Oh, I don't disagree with the federal government's overall response at all. I don't disagree with that. I think it's been horrendous. I think it's been totally unacceptable. And of course, a part of the unacceptability is the fact that we are changing leadership at the federal government level. And that's an indication of the unacceptability. I think had it been handled differently and more appropriately, that we might not be looking at changing leadership at the top of the government. And so I agree wholeheartedly that overall, what I meant was that the process of trying to distribute, now that the vaccinations are here, and how do we try and make sure that population groups who are very vulnerable and who are greatly needed, and of course, essential workers to me are every kind of essential worker. For example, the bus driver is an essential worker. The woman at the daycare center is an essential worker. The person in the grocery store is an essential worker, because all of these individuals are necessary to keep our economy moving and to keep our government functioning And I don't mean just the decision makers. I mean those for whom decisions are made for. And so I certainly agree with that.
I would just hope that we can get the state to move faster than it is.
Well, we keep pushing them.
There we go.
There we go. We keep pushing them, keep pushing them. As a matter of fact, I would probably be called a socialist in terms of my personal views about a lot of things. And I think we could change even with healthcare. It's my position that we actually practice more sickness care than we do healthcare, and that we need to put much more emphasis on prevention across the board. And if we did, some of the disparities that we encounter and the disparities that we know exist would not be nearly as great as they are.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think when I stated this earlier, that the COVID-19 exposed our system with all of its holes. It exposed it. And so I hope we don't lose this opportunity to fix these problems when we get over this hump. And because the next COVID is coming, and it may not come in this form, but it's going to come in another form. So we have to fix these structural problems to get care to people quickly.
And I agree with you, Pete, and that's one of the reasons I often say that everything begins at self. And if everybody promotes as much as they can promote, you know, there are those of us who feel that as long as you have a capitalistic society like the one in which we operate, that there are certain contributing factors that play very serious roles in decision making, and many of those decisions are made. I would think that the federal government should invest more resources into trying to speed up the production of the vaccine, so that we're not as prolonged in terms of being able to generate enough to get everybody vaccinated until, 2 years from now, or whatever the length of time is, that it is a state of emergency, and we have to treat it like a state of emergency and do some things that we would not do if it was not as critical as I think things are. And I also just believe that we ought to have a healthcare delivery system where every individual, no matter who he or she might be, have access to quality, comprehensive, culturally competent healthcare without regard to their ability to pay for it. And that our government is rich enough, wealthy enough, our country is wealthy enough to do that if we ever develop the will to do it. There are other countries that are ahead of us in terms of what we provide, and yet we are supposed to be the wealthiest, the most sophisticated nation on the face of the earth. And yet we're lagging behind other nations in terms of how well we take care of our people.
Thank you. I would like to thank all the panel, and I think it's about time. And if you could, in 30 to 45-second closing remarks would be highly appreciated. And I'll start with Dr. Chandi. Very quick, brief remarks.
Yeah, I think the need of the hour is to build trust with minority communities, specifically African Americans, Latinx communities, which have bared the brunt of not just this pandemic, but the opioid pandemic, the HIV pandemic, and every other health malady that's up there, from hypertension to diabetes to obesity. And it's time that we reach out and at least get the vaccines out there so we can protect our folks. These are people who we live around, we care about, and we've got to help them out. We've got to help in every which way possible and spend our energy on this, because the rich folks and the people with means are going to take care of themselves. You know, society is not judged by how you take care of the rich people. It's how you take care of the folks who don't have all the means. And I think it's within our humanity to do this, because are we really a society that deserves all of this praise as being the richest and the best if we don't take care of people that have, you know, more difficulty reaching the goals that everybody else has reached, that we feel other folks have reached? So I think we need to reach out to folks and be a kinder, gentler nation. And we should be the ones helping out, because we can.
Dr. Graham, you want to make any closing remarks, please?
Well, you know, I've been thinking about this, and one of the things that occurs to me is this vaccine is not the only vaccine that requires 2 doses. As you get older, you may be vaccinated for pneumonia. That could require 2 doses. If you get vaccinated for shingles, that will require 2 doses. So this isn't something that's out of the ordinary. This is something that we really need to do. The other thing I kind of bring to people's mind is it's not going to cost anything to get the vaccine. You're not going to have to pay for it. I mean, this is really a gift. And I think it would be great if we could look at it that way.
Dr. Thomas?
I would just leave people with the idea that vaccine hesitancy is not new, to Dr. Graham's point, and we have to normalize this in a way that does not make people feel ostracized. And so in order to do that, we have to educate, but not coerce. And so it's a respectful education that allows people to make good decisions on behalf of them and their community. And that's usually how I put it. I'm not trying to, make decisions for you. I want you to make the decision using all the data points. And usually when I do that, to Dr. Davis' point, I'm really searching for that frontal lobe to kick in, and for them to make a decision that's great for themselves and the community.
Thank you. Dr. Johnson?
Representative Davis really spoke to truth tonight. Healthcare is a right, not a privilege. And our healthcare system has always approached healthcare as a privilege. Unfortunately, we need much change to occur. And Black and Brown communities have been impacted by the fact that we have always approached healthcare as a privilege rather than as a right, and historically have been subjected to withholding, keeping things away from people, not making sure that they get out to people of all walks of life. The federal government got this right for a change, making sure that the vaccine's available to all people, regardless of the ability to pay. It's a free vaccine. And hopefully this is just the start with change in leadership at the head of our country, that we will see our healthcare system moving in the right direction. Please take advantage of this. It is a life-saving vaccine. It will make a difference in your life. It will make a difference to your family. It will lower your stress level. It will improve your mental health, knowing that you're protected by this vaccine. So I hope, we've talked a lot about the frontal lobe. I hope everybody will use the frontal lobe on this and recognize that this is a grand opportunity. Please follow all of us who have gotten the vaccine. and get it yourself. Thanks for listening to us tonight.
Thank you. Dr. Lynn?
Again, I want to thank everyone in the panel for this really interesting and I think important discussion. I want to leave you with a little bit of optimism. I agree wholeheartedly, and I've said this before, and I've actually had discussions with some members of Representative Davis's staff in the past, that the United States of America has really never had a public health agenda. And as Dr. Tyler pointed out, we're paying the price for it now because we're suffering through this and we're learning on the fly. But I am optimistic that from this point on, things are going to change, that we do have a public health agenda. And we realize that this lesson has come up before. It's the most vulnerable members of our society that need the care first. And because it benefits all of us. And it benefits society on many different levels, both humanistically as well as from an economic perspective. And so I'm hoping that this was a bitter pill to swallow, and by next year in 2021, we can look at this in the rearview mirror and saying we're going to do better. And we've learned a lesson, a painful lesson. And I wish you all a really safe and healthy new year.
Dr. Banyan?
Yes, thank you. I think that this decision that people have to make will be one of the most, if not the most important decision that they will make in decades to come. And so I want to reiterate this message that it's very important to make sure that we're being unemotional, cold, and just consuming comprehensive fact-based knowledge from the science. And I do want to add one more thing to the frontal lobe, and that is the heart. In the heart, you have in the trust you have with your personal physician, with your personal healthcare providers. That is so important. These people who you have been able to develop these relationships with, who you've trusted, and they've trusted you, and you build this bond. That is very, very, very important. So I do want to add that in there. And we are talking about not just physical health. We're talking about an investment for brain health, psychological health, and emotional health, which, I became a psychiatrist, so I'm biased, but that is the fundamental basis upon which we're able to flourish and accomplish things in our lives. If we don't have that, and I think that we've seen what's happened when our mental health and psychological and emotional health crumble, we've all taken hits in those areas. So I really do urge you to set aside as best as you can the fear and go after the antidote, which is knowledge, and the vaccine, which is going to help us get to the next phase and the next step in leading a healthy life.
So I'd like to request Congressman to make the closing remarks.
Well, let me just do this. First of all, I want to thank you, Dr. Reddy and Nicole, Nikki, for organizing this event. I want to thank all of our viewers, the individuals who have signed on, who are part of the discussion. I want to thank Dr. Graham, Doug, who is a fellow in our office. As a matter of fact, I may be the only member of the House of Representatives that have their own private physician in their office every day working. And I consider myself to be most fortunate that Dr. Graham has been with us and provided his experiences as well as expertise throughout the year and has re-upped. That means he's signed on for another round. And so we can't be more delighted about that. I want to thank all of you gentlemen for lending to us your time, your expertise, your knowledge, and lending credibility to the idea that the vaccination is something that should, in fact, be used by as many people as we can get it to as quickly as we can do so. I certainly would concur that we have missed the boat in many ways in terms of healthcare delivery in our country, but we've missed a lot of things. Not just healthcare delivery. You know, if there are problems, I could spend 2 weeks discussing and raising nothing but problem issues and problem areas. But I mentioned the other day that my mother, who was a pretty wise woman, was always trying to teach stuff, said, you know, instead of just cursing the darkness, why don't you light a candle? And I think what we have been attempting to do has been to light a candle and to express possibility and potentiality. I want to agree with Dr. Shundi that the best way to measure the greatness of a society, I think, is to look at how well it treats its old, how well it treats its young, how well it treats those who have difficulty caring for themselves. That is people with disabilities and people who need all the help that they can get. So I just thank each and every one of you for what you have contributed. Know that you will continue to do so. And I also wish for you and your families a wonderful holiday season as we close out the year with the understanding that the next year is going to be a very different year and that there is light at the end of the tunnel. So I thank you all so very much. It's been a wonderful evening and I couldn't have enjoyed it more. Dr. Reddy, again, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your interest, your engagement, and your involvement.
Thank you.
Nikki, again, thanks to you for your outstanding work of bringing us together, putting us together, and making it happen.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, I'd like to thank the panel for your time. It was a great conversation and a wonderful evening. Hope everyone will get this vaccine to stay safe and healthy. And I'd like to wish all of you Happy New Year and thank you. Nikki?
Sure. Just want to remind everyone to don't forget to watch our Couch Conversations with the Doctors on Mondays right here on social media so you can get some more of these snippets of healthcare, knowing that health is wealth. And we also want to remind you, as always, to make sure that you do those 3 little things that keep you safe in this pandemic. And that is to wash your hands, to wash them very good, 20 seconds or more. Make sure that you social distance, stretch those arms out. And if someone is touching you or you are touching them, just ask them to scoot over just a little bit. We are so close because the vaccine is here. And to make sure that you wear your face coverings over your nose and mouth, making sure that you stay safe. Thank you so much. Until next Monday, we'll see you then. Have a great evening.
Thank you all.